If you've been watching the documentary when I've had it on here, you realise that it's not like a mainstream documentary because it's looking at facts and evidence. It's not looking at people's emotions or how people felt and that kind of thing. It is a fairly forensic set of documentaries. All right, part two. Anyone who wants to look into some interesting chemtrail research, go to Andrew Johnson's website, which is checktheevidence.com. I'm just going to skip past that part, just so we'll get finished in good time. All right. Now, I'm just going to start with this statement that real problem people don't get their face on mainstream TV. And I'm going to use the example of Osama bin Laden just to explain what I mean by this statement, because I think a lot of people in this room probably know that Osama bin Laden had nothing at all to do with 9/11. There's not a single shred of evidence linking Osama bin Laden to 9/11. But there is evidence that Osama bin Laden had connections to the CIA before 9/11. So the clip I'm going to show you is of Bill Cooper speaking 3 months before 9/11 on his radio show, and he's talking about Osama bin Laden and about how Osama bin Laden was recruited by the CIA. Remember, this clip is 3 months before 9/11.
Can you believe what you have been seeing on CNN today, ladies and gentlemen? Can you believe it? Supposedly, a CNN reporter found Osama bin Laden, took a television camera crew with him, went into Osama bin Laden's hideout, interviewed him and his top leadership, his top lieutenants and colonels and generals in their hideout. Now, don't you think that's kind of strange, folks? You see, because the largest intelligence apparatus in the world, with the biggest budget in the history of the world, has been looking for Osama bin Laden for years and years and years, and can't find him. The FBI also, under the leadership of Louis Freeh, has been looking for Osama bin Laden for years and years and years and years and years and many years, and can't find him. Some doofus, jerk-off reporter with a camera crew waltzes right into his hideout and interviews him. Now, that tells us two things. Either everyone in the intelligence community and all of the intelligence agencies of the United States government are blithering idiots and incompetent fools, including the entire apparatus of the FBI and all of their personnel, or they're lying to us. They're not looking for him at all. And the second is the truth. You see, the CIA created Osama bin Laden. They recruited him. They trained him. They found his leadership. They brought them all together. They showed them how to fight the Soviet Union in Afghanistan, and when that was over, they still continued to fund him and train him, and they're now using him to help bring about world government by making him the big boogeyman, because they can't use Saddam Hussein anymore. If I were the head of the Central Intelligence Agency, within 2 weeks I would have him dead or in custody without fail. Without fail. A reporter from CNN and his little camera crew got in to Osama bin Laden's secret hideout and conducted an interview. If you don't believe me, tune into CNN. They're probably running it right now as I'm speaking. And if you believe it, you are one of the stupidest jerks that ever lived on the face of this earth. And whatever is going to happen that they're going to blame on Osama bin Laden, don't you even believe it.
Whatever's going to happen that they're going to blame on Osama bin Laden, don't you even believe it. That's 3 months before 9/11. 2 months after 9/11, the guy speaking there was dead. He was shot outside his house. Now, so my statement, real problem people don't get their face on mainstream TV. Osama bin Laden was not a real problem person. He was a creation of the CIA. They wanted him on mainstream TV. Now, you can use the same litmus test for whistleblowers, because people who give away government secrets and speak out are supposedly problem people. And if they're wanted by the government, they're not going to get their faces on TV, because the CIA or whoever wants them is going to capture them and put them in prison before they get on TV. And I would apply that litmus test to these two guys, Ed Snowden and Julian Assange. They've had masses of coverage on mainstream TV. They're not whistleblowers. They want these guys' disclosures to be known about. Now here is a whistleblower who has not been on mainstream TV, Dr Judy Wood, and her book, Where Did the Towers Go?, I would suggest is the most important book yet written this century, because it explains in scientific terms what happened on 9/11. And she has not been allowed on mainstream TV. That tells me she's a genuine whistleblower, and all the evidence in her book tells me that she's a genuine whistleblower. Now, but I'm not going to talk about Dr Judy Wood. I'm going to talk about another whistleblower, someone who has not been extensively covered on mainstream TV. But before I introduce him, I'm just going to talk about secret aircraft. Because if you tell people that the United States are developing aircraft in secret and they've got phenomenal capabilities and they can go really fast, most people will say, well, of course they develop aircraft in secret. That's their job. They do it to protect us. But if you were to say to that person, they've developed triangular craft which are 10 times the size of this room, along each side, 600 feet. They can travel at Mach 9 vertically or horizontally, so they can get into space in 40 seconds from a standing start. They're silent. They can get to the moon in a couple of hours, and they can get to Mars in a few weeks. And they can traverse the solar system. They can land them on the moon or neighbouring planets and use them as bases. And they've weaponized them, and they've got them in orbit in various places. And they've been used to monitor the planet and possibly look down on us and with various different types of weapons, pick out particular countries or people. Now, would you still say the same? That you're not bothered that the US are developing secret craft if they've got that kind of capability? I think we have the right to know about it, because I think that is what is going on. And it comes from the disclosures of someone called Ed Fouche. Now, this is Andrew Johnson, and Andrew Johnson and I recorded a TV show all about the disclosures of Ed Fouche. Now, Ed Fouche came out in 1998. He's an avionics engineer. He worked with various people on secret projects who gave him information about this particular space vehicle. Right? It's 600 feet along each side. It doesn't need wings to fly. It has what's called a magnetic field disruptor, which is powered by a plasma accelerator. And I'm going to come on and I'm going to explain how this plasma accelerator creates a magnetic vortex field around the craft, which somehow disrupts the force of gravity. All right? Because most physicists will agree that at some level electromagnetism and gravity are connected, and that you can affect gravity with electromagnetics. Now, when we've put this interview out, because Andrew's done over 6 hours of interviews with Edgar Fouche, right? They're all on his website if you want to go and watch them, right? After we put that, and it was on national TV, various trolls on the internet started trying to debunk Edgar Fouche. And I had emails from viewers saying, Richard, why are you covering Ed Fouche in the TR3B? He's a liar, he's a proven liar, and he's forged one of his documents. Well, I would point you to this document written by Andrew Johnson entitled The TR3B Trolls and the Truth. Because the two people who have been trying to discredit Ed Fouche, David Hilton and a guy called Jeremy Riss, who goes by the name of Alien Scientist on the internet, Andrew suspects are government agents. And you would need to read this detailed document to understand how they have gone about trying to trash Ed Fouche's claims. Now, either one of two things is true. Either Fouche is a liar and these guys are right, or Fouche is a very important whistleblower and they're trying to trash his work because they want this leak in their secrecy plugged. And I suspect it's the latter. All right? One of them's got a criminal record and links to another disinformation organisation. But this lecture is not about this argument which is going on the internet about Ed Fouche. All right, they filmed him on Skype without his knowledge when he'd had a drink, and they were trying to put words in his mouth and this kind of thing. But I suspect that this has been done as a result of my TV show, because David Hilton actually took an extract from the TV show, and then he showed how Fouche is supposed to have forged a document. But Fouche completely refutes that he's forged any of his documents, and he's got hundreds of documents. So this is Fouche, in the US Air Force for many years, and as I say, worked on lots of different secret projects, and he worked at Area 51, the infamous Area 51. All right, now I'm going to go into some of the details of this secret aerial vehicle, triangular vehicle, and you'll notice there on this particular drawing or this diagram that it was like a kind of a purpley colour. Well, Fouche claims that they have a coating of quasi-crystals which can change their radar absorptiveness, and they can change their colour. So if you were to see one of these things, it would be blending in with the sky. So if you've seen it at night, it's going to be black. All right? If you've seen it during the day, it's going to be the same colour as the sky. And quasi-crystals, which Fouche spoke about in 1998, there's a guy recently just got the Nobel Prize for Physics or Chemistry in quasi-crystals. So he's talking about things before they've been released into the white world. And there are other reasons why I suspect Fouche is a genuine whistleblower, which I'm going to come on to. But before I do that, I'm just going to show you some evidence which backs up Ed Fouche's claims that people who've seen these 600 feet along one side triangular vehicles that are silent, they've been seen all over the place. In 1988, a wave known as the Staffordshire Flap occurred at Cannock Chase. In March 1997, the Sheffield UFO incident took place.
We had 52 flying triangle incidents over Derby.
It took shape. It was a triangle, a big huge triangle with the lights all the way around the edge, and it went over my flat.
What I noticed is it was sort of rotating like that.
I saw this massive, great big black triangle sitting in there.
A huge black triangular object.
I realised it was this black triangular shaped object.
It's the size of it's massive, like a great big football field.
It must have been at least a football field in size.
Almost the size of a football pitch.
The size of 3 football pitches.
Just added off.
Right.
But there were no sound at all.
I could see then it was a triangle.
It was absolutely massive. And in the centre was a small cluster of red and orange, like honeycomb arrangement of lights.
And there was one red one in the centre.
One silent.
A light at each corner and the big light in the middle.
Pretty much dead on what I saw, to be honest.
And it was at this point that the triangle tilted up in the air, but it rose, like I say, like a submarine underwater.
It travelled fast and, most strangely, was completely silent. Overall dimensions approximately the size of a football pitch.
And it actually came down in the road and hovered about 10 foot, stood there staring at it.
Now these statements are all from a film I made last year called Almost Identified Flying Objects. And also in that film I've reported on the Belgian UFO flap of 1990. And in the film we've screened some video of Professor Emil Schweitzer, because the Belgian Air Force actually chased some of these triangles that were appearing in the skies over Belgium, and they captured them on radar. So the radar data was given to Belgium's top radar expert. He examined the data. He said, yes, they're definitely real objects, and we can't understand how they're performing these particular manoeuvres. And it was a bit of a scoop to get this particular footage of Professor Emil Schweitzer from David Caton, who got it from researcher Harry Harris.
Another wave of black triangles appeared in Belgium in 1990. The Belgian Air Force scrambled F-16 fighters to try and intercept them, but were outmanoeuvred every time. After days of activity, the Belgian Air Force had no explanation, and to this day still have no explanation as to the origin of the triangular UFOs. After the events, an investigation was launched, and the airborne radar tips from the F-16s were given to radar expert Professor Emil Schweitzer. Schweitzer ruled out any form of radar anomaly and concluded the radar systems were tracking real objects. Calculations were carried out on the data, and in one manoeuvre the triangular craft turned a sharp corner, resulting in an acceleration of 30 g. That's 30 times greater than the Earth's gravity. This would be impossible for a conventional aircraft, and any occupants would be dead. Incredibly, in 1991, Schweitzer was asked by the British Ministry of Defence to come over to the UK to give British military chiefs a briefing on the movements of this unknown craft and explain the radar data. We know this because Schweitzer himself told researcher Harry Harris when Harris managed to get an interview with him in his hotel whilst in the UK.
What I found by calculations starting from the data recorded by the pilot, that the UFO made at one point of his trajectory a very strange motion. And during that very strange motion, the normal acceleration was, let's say, above 30 Gs. Yes. So the trajectory was, first of all, the UFO was flying almost level, and then suddenly made a 90-degree motion. At that point, where he made a 90-degree turn, that point, the normal acceleration was above 30 Gs. Climbed almost vertically, and then descended obliquely to the ground. During the oblique descent, the UFO was flying supersonic.
Is it reasonable to assume that there couldn't have been anything living in that machine, that UFO, as we understand life?
I would say that with the present human technology, that's impossible.
The MOD have never publicly admitted they requested a meeting with Schweitzer.
So he said, with present human technology, that would be impossible. I would change that. With present disclosed human technology, that would be impossible. Because I suspect that what we were seeing in the 1990 Belgian UFO flap was some version or other of the TR-3B. That's not to say that UFOs don't exist, because I think they do. And I'm going to come on to that. Now, okay, so let's have a look at Ed Fouche talking now. In this next clip, he talks about two space stations which have been put in orbit above the Earth that the N.S.A. have not told anyone about. They haven't told the American government about them. And he also speaks about two different methods that the N.S.A. had in the 1990s to go to and from these two particular satellites. One method was using the TR-3B, which I'm going to come on to. The other method was to use two conventional aircrafts, one on top of the other, the SR-75 and the SR-74. SR-74 would go on top of the SR-75. It would take off from a normal runway. It would go to a very high altitude and then would release the SR-74. The SR-74 could then actually get into space and go to these two space stations that they've not told anyone about. All right? But the SR-74 was not able to take off from the ground, so they needed the two conventional type aircraft with wings and jet engines to get this thing in orbit. So they don't need a space shuttle in order to get into orbit. And the TR-3B was the other vehicle that they were using to get into space.
The NASA space shuttle, I'm here to tell you, is really an antique by comparison. The joke is on us. If you think these rumors are far-fetched, look at the YB-49 and the XB-70, flown in 1948 and 1964, respectively. Now look at the SR-75, which has been spotted numerous times. You say the government can't keep a secret? Boy, you're wrong. From my sources, two new vehicles have been placed in permanent orbit. One of these vehicles is the Space Orbital Nuclear Service Intercept Vehicle, SUN-SIV. When you hear it from another reliable source in 10 years, you'll remember this. It's codenamed Locust. The SR-74 and the TR-3B flying triangle can deliver spares, replacement units, service fuels, chemicals, and modules to the SUN-SIV, or Locust. The robotic SUN-SIV uses deliverables to service, calibrate, repair, and replace parts on the newer N.S.A., CIA, and NRO Ferret satellites. And I know for a fact that they were developing robotic repair of electronics equipment as far back as '81, because I worked a program to where they didn't want technicians looking at the equipment.
So this is in 1998, he's saying all this, and he's not really being given a platform to air these particular disclosures.